Thank you for choosing News Central. Welcome to One Slot, your Pan-African discussion program. Sincere apologies for starting a little behind schedule. I'm Felicity Ezewike. Despite laws prohibiting the practice and international pledges to end it, forced and child marriages remain widespread across many African countries, particularly in rural and impoverished communities. Even as the world wrapped up this year's 16 days of activism to end violence against women, in parts of this continent, young girls are still being pulled out of school, sold into marriages they never consented to, and robbed of their futures. Now, here's what data tells us. In Niger, 76% of girls are married before the age of 18. In Chad and the Central African Republic, that figure exceeds 60%. In Ethiopia, Mozambique, and Malawi, rates still hover above 40%. Closer home here, Nigeria has an estimated 23.6 million girls and women who were married before the age of 18. Of that number, 10.3 million were married before the age of 15. According to UNICEF's 2022 report, over 130 million girls and women in Africa were married as children. And if nothing changes, 10 million more are at risk in the next decade, driven by poverty, insecurity, and climate shocks. The agency has warned that by 2050, Africa could count for nearly half of the world's child brides. These girls are being forced into adulthood far too soon. Many face physical and sexual abuse, life-threatening pregnancies, and death during childbirth. Some never return to school. Some never make it to their 18th birthday. The questions are multiple. They remain. Why does forced marriages still thrive despite laws, pledges, and campaigns? What will it truly take to end this scourge? Let's turn now to our guest, Obianuju Iloanya, gender equality and peace advocate. Also joining in is Dare Olagoke-Adaramoye, child's rights and gender advocate. Thank you both for being here today. I'll take a short break. We'll be right back with our guests. Let's reintroduce our guest. Dare Olagoke-Adaramoye is a child's right and gender advocate. We'll be joined a little later by Obianuju Iloanya. Okay, Dare, let's set the premise for this conversation. Time is not a friend, particularly today. Despite national laws and international commitments, why is forced and child marriage still so prevalent? Dare, if you can hear me, the question is for you.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Okay, I'm saying we have national laws, we have pledges, international commitments.
Hello, Felicity, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir. Can you hear me, please?
Okay. Now I can hear you, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm just trying to ask our first opener. We have commitments at national and international levels. We have laws. But why do we still have cases of forced and child marriages still spread across the African continent?
Oh, okay, thank you. Definitely because of it is true we have laws and policies in place, and it's also true that we still have we still have to face the menace of child marriage across communities. And this is because of its depth in cultural and social norm. You know, the law itself is not really addressing or tackling the root cause of child marriage as it may be. Take, for example, around here, child marriage is basically tied to poverty. When you look at the root cause and the cultural belief, you know, there are some myths and misconceptions that makes all of these things thrive. And so it is done as something that is done in secrecy and tribes. And then there is also the issue of religion, because there is also religious belief about the issue of child marriage, and which our laws, I don't think has really taken into consideration. And this is why we still have to face child marriage across communities. There are several beliefs, there are several myths and misconceptions, there is social norm, and there are cultural beliefs and religious beliefs that are tied to child marriage. And this is why our laws seems to be ineffective. And you know, when we're talking about the cultural and social beliefs, who reports who, especially when you're talking in terms of law, the law must have somebody who is reporting. There must be a perpetrator and must be a prosecutor. But who reports who, as the case may be? An example is we have a 12-year-old girl who is pregnant and married off to an elderly person because the family, you know, took a loan from this rich man, and then because they couldn't pay back, they have to betroth her to this man. And then at age 12, she's pregnant, and then the man had to return her to the family house and say she lacks home training. She lacks quality of what it takes to be a wife. This is about 40-something-year-old man getting married to a 12-year-old girl. And then they became an issue in the community. And you know what? The community were begging the man to marry this girl because of the belief that, okay, if she's left, taken back to the family house culturally, she's not deemed to marry again. I mean, this is a baby carrying baby. So most of the time, it is because our law, yes, we have laws in place, but then it is not really addressing the root cause of child marriage. And that's why it seems the practice persists and then the laws are ineffective. Thank you.
How do cultural, religious, and economic justifications continue to override what we know as legal protection meant to safeguard girls against these shenanigans?
I didn't get that, please.
I'm asking how our cultural, economic, and religious justifications continue to override legal safeguards that are already on the ground to protect young girls.
Okay, so there are several issues that could make all of these factors to look like it's overriding law. You know, law is binding on any one of us, but as the case may be, sometimes there are several challenges. Number one, there is low awareness about law. There is low awareness. And then you see the people in charge of law, some of them also have cultural belief or either religious belief. You know, they believe, like I said, social norm. So the person who is supposed to prosecute is also a believer. He's also born into a community that has cultural belief, that has religious belief, that have traditional beliefs and the like. So this is why it looks like the law is, and then you see the laws itself. If you look at most of the laws we have in place, there are lacunas, there are gaps. And these gaps are what people in those communities are exploring to still relinquish to make child marriage to still look like it's thriving. So there needs to be review of some of our laws to address most of these issues, especially putting the religion factor, the economic factor, the socioeconomic factor into consideration when making laws, and not just making laws that seems to be to not be relevant to our community, because most of the laws don't consider the peculiarity of communities. Thank you.
Let's localize it and talk about Nigeria. The statistics are obvious. Nigeria has one of the highest absolute numbers of child brides, third globally after India and Bangladesh. Talk to us about systemic gaps that continue to allow this to happen. I understand we have Obianuju Iloanya. I will come to you in a bit, but let me stay with Dare, please.
Okay, so thank you. For us, we have to localize it to Nigerian content. Two major factors in Nigeria. And probably the third one, we have the religion. For religious factor, there is the belief. And you know, when we look at the statistics, if we are to compare the South to the North, we will see that we have high prevalence of child bride in the North than we have in the South, southern part of the country. And most of the time, if you look at the root causes analysis, you see that it's most times tied to religious belief. And then in the South, most of the time, it is tied to cultural and socioeconomic factor. You know, we have beliefs that, especially when you look at communities where female genital mutilation is done, FGM is one of the contributing factor to child bride. And you know that Nigeria as well ranked third globally when it comes to female genital mutilation prevalence. And it is believed that once a girl is genitally mutilated, irrespective of her age, she's now an adult. For example, some community does FGM as rite of passage. It is believed that if you are not genitally mutilated or circumcised, as people may call it, you are still a child, irrespective of your age. So,
okay, I think we have a bit of a challenge with the network there. Let's bring in Obianuju and also establish a premise for this conversation from her point of view. The first question I put to Dare was about national laws and international commitment. All of these are clearly stated about, you know, how we're going to support and protect young children. I want you to talk to us about your thoughts on why these practice continues across Africa.
Thank you very much for having me. The reason why we have child marriage persisting are all of the reasons that Dare has already stated. We have an issue with the law not being stepped down to the local communities. So there's very low awareness about this. But even when it exists, there are social-cultural and religious reasons why it persists. People will do as they would do because they believe that their culture and their religion sometimes supersede. But beyond that, there is the problem of government failure to these people. When Dare talks to you about social-cultural, socio-economic factors, he says that you might think it's only just about poverty, but it's also about not having access to infrastructural gaps. If you have a community where you have said that child marriage is ostracized and it should not be allowed, and is in the law that it should not be allowed, but then there are no schools for them to go to, there is no pathways to economic empowerment for them. What it means is that you have just made the law, but the law does not serve them. So they are still bound to experience child marriage. Parents are going to use their children as currencies to escape poverty. People are going to go get married instead of go to school or get access to empowerment or skills development opportunities. So when these things happen, that is why it persists. What is the gap? When you say if the nearest secondary school is like 10 kilometers away, it's a dangerous walkway for a girl to move that far to access education. The parents would rather give them security, as they call it, in the place of child marriage. So these are some of the intersecting reasons why it could persist. Because when we make these laws, we make it and we say the laws have been made, but how do we ensure that the laws are then applied? And of course, you have the issue of the people who enforce the laws. When issues like this are brought up, they tell you that, well, the father has to make a decision for the children because it is a family issue. So you find that when you even go out of the way to complain about child marriage in societies, sometimes the law enforcement agencies do not take you seriously enough to act on it. Sometimes they tell you that it's not better the girl gets married instead of getting spoiled. That's the word. And so these are some of the reasons why it persists. We need to localize our law, but also we need to make awareness of the law larger, get people to understand what the law says and how the law will be enforced. But we also need to train our law enforcement agencies so that they can also begin to apply the law as it is made in the agreements that we have and the laws that exist. And of course, we also have to provide alternatives. You can't say, oh, don't do this, and then you do not provide gaps. And then you need gaps that those things exist for. When you do not have access to education, you don't have access to skill sets that would empower you, get you economic mobility, upward mobility, then how then do we begin to talk about child marriage to you? That is the only other option that exists in your society. That's what you get to know. That's what you get to go for. And that's some of the things that we should also begin to address. But also there's a place of patriarchy and men thinking that because they are in control, they should be able to decide what happens with women's bodies. And so you have the situation whereby young people in young girls in Nigeria dying at childbirth because at 15, 14, instead of being given a book to go learn, you are being given a man to go sleep with. And then you have the issue of men being afraid of educated, empowered women. They do not want that. They want a blank, clean slate that they can mold and control. This is the
It's amazing that you give this description in the 21st century.
Child marriage in Nigeria, in Africa generally.
It's kind of curious and amazing that
they can control.
Obianuju, if you can hear me, I'm trying to concur with you in the regard of having in 2021 people who still want to mold another human being so they can control and manipulate. It's quite unfortunate. I will stay with you a little longer because we started with Dare and you were not here. Why does enforcement of anti-child marriage laws remain weak and inconsistent in many African countries? What are some of the key factors that's making these laws almost non-existent?
It is also the belief of the people who are supposed to be enforcing the laws. You find people who have cultural and religious belief in marriage. No matter how you tell them, no matter the education that you give to them, no matter how you explain to them that you have laws against child marriage, they are always going to side with people who are enforcing child marriage because they do not understand the law. They don't even respect it. They feel like the law is against them. They feel like it is antithetical to their belief, to their cultural belief and their religious belief. What we need them to do is to explain to them the evils of child marriage, the challenges that it causes, how it harms the society, how it harms us. That is the only way you can begin to maybe win them over, or better still, remove them from the system. We do not do enough vetting of people who are in charge of enforcing the laws, and that is why you find them still existing. No matter what you do, if you meet a police officer or a legal professional who believes in child marriage religiously or culturally, it will be very difficult to convince them that a harm or a crime has been committed because child marriage has happened or because a child is being forced into marriage. This is their personal belief or this is their religious belief, and it's almost impossible to get them to understand the impact of their decision to not enforce the law when it is already existing. There should also be punishments for these people who do not enforce the law, even because of their religious belief. Because we can't then sideline the law and say, it's your religious belief, and then we can't force you. No, the law should also exist for people who do not enforce the anti-child marriage laws. If you're a law enforcement officer, if you're a judicial officer, and you do not protect young people, and when it is reported to you, you don't do anything about it, there should be some level of punishment for them so that they understand the impact of their decision to not act. So that's what I think.
All right, Dare, staying with Nigeria, how has the Child's Rights Act fared in protecting girls, given that all states have domesticated it, except I'm wrong?
Yeah, thank you very much. So it is true that all the states in the Federation has domesticated child right law, has child right law in place. And then to also complement that, we also have states, about 35 states now, having the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law. There is an act as with regarding to that at the national level, which states have also domesticated, which also prohibits not just child marriage, but some other issues surrounding children, women, and men. But unfortunately, just like Obianuju has rightly said in the beginning, you see there is low awareness about the law, and then you see people don't see this as an issue. So far, they are not aware about the law. In fact, in so many places we've come across law enforcement agents who doesn't even know the content of the law. It is true that people are aware that this law is in place, but then when people don't know what this document is all about, you see, it cannot effectively protect children. And that is why people feel entitled to their children to say, whatever decision I take about my children is my decision, not regarding whatever it is that the law says. And then you see, this also agrees with some religious perspective that, it is the duty of the parent to train children, yes. And then so they interpret it to also include that they can do whatever it is, including marrying them off at a tender age. And like she has said, she was mentioning the fact that law enforcement agents will say, is it not better for them to be married than for them to become promiscuous? In fact, around there in the South where I am, if a girl there gets pregnant, whether you are 12 years, whether you are 13 years, the next thing is for them to push you to your husband. At that time, you are not a girl anymore. You are a woman. And then you are expected to start. So it happens across community. And then you see, when you take cases to people who are supposed to prosecute, the first thing you will hear from them is, who takes care of the girl? Who pays for her bill? Is it not better? At that time, community people begins to set in, and then they set aside the law. And then it doesn't go beyond the room, and then they take decision, and the law stays on this side. Whatever the community or the family agrees stays on this side. So the law in my own place is still very, very weak when it comes to enforcement, and it's not really protected. But there is improvements years after year, and we can do better. That's it from me.
All right. Obianuju, talk to us about what are some of the most devastating long-term consequences, physically, emotionally, economically, for girls that are forced into marriage.
Well, I think that the first and foremost is VVF. We don't talk about VVF enough and how it affects young girls, how they become social pariahs because of VVF that comes as a result of being child brides themselves. So when a child gets married and is forced to carry babies and birth a baby birthing a baby can lead to VVF, and that will lead to incontinence and social ostracization. It also means an end to their education. It is very rare, in fact, probably 1 in 1,000 case of a child marriage, a child bride being allowed to go back to school to access education. These are some of the challenges we have. And when you do not have access to education, when you are experiencing incontinence and then VVF, you are experiencing incontinence as a result of VVF, the chances of you having any form of economic mobility becomes lower. So you are stuck with petty trading if there is opportunity for it, or homekeeping. These are unfair to young people. Most importantly, the lack of access to education, because you find that we have very high number of young people out of school. A lot of these people are young girls, and a lot of them are brides who do not have access to secondary school education, which is very, very key in accessing any form of employment. Passing SIS, that's the most important part. And when the child doesn't have access to that SS3, WAEC, secondary school leaving certificate, what option do they have for economic mobility? None. But also, what we have is now a generational problem, where a child who is forced to become a woman and have children, then perpetuates it to her own children, expecting that her own child gets married at 13. You see them saying, oh, by bomb, I had you when I was 12. So you get to get married when you are 14, and you should even be thankful for it. This is now a culture that is being normalized, and it's unfair, because what we see is generation after generation of young girls being denied access to growth, access to some opportunities that young boys their age would access to the good things of life, to social mobility, to even self-actualization. None. Every dream a child has dies upon at the point where she's forced to become a bride. But what we also lose is a very important part of our economic power. You can't sustain the economy without 50% of the economy. Women make up 50% of the economy, just like men do. When we force these women to not have access to opportunities to grow, economic opportunities, educational opportunities, what we do is that we starve our economy from stimulation. Local economic development can as well die because there are no women supporting or helping or doing their own parts in getting the local economic development. But very important to me, and I'd like people to remember that one of the biggest problems we have currently now in Nigeria is mortality rate. We have maternal mortality rate that is as high as 35%. The most people who die at childbirth are young girls. What it means is that by forcing young people to become child brides, we are killing them. They are dying. We are literally committing murder by encouraging early marriage, child marriage, underage forced marriage. That is what we are doing. And so what we need to do is to begin to talk to these communities to understand that your child's body does not necessarily need to become a statistics for you to understand.
Okay, I mean, you've given us some ideas
for marriage
here.
Until they are above 18. So these are some of the things that happen.
All right, Dare, let's look at the beyond this generation, for instance, in real terms. How do these marriages affect the next generation, the children born to child brides?
Okay, thank you very much. For children born to child bride, most of the time, you see, we're talking about baby carrying baby most of the time. So we're talking about a generation that is losing their moral and social value. And this is where it starts from because, you know, we have a mother who becomes a mother at the age when she's supposed to be taught to become a woman. And number two, another effect that it has is this contributes to the rising maternal mortality rate because when you give birth at a very tender age, there is possibility for this to contribute to not just mortality rate, also to morbidity rate in the society because basically they lack knowledge of what it takes to become a mother. And then this increases pressure on these girls. And, you know, and that's why we see most of them at the age where they are supposed to be in school. They are running around, not just to fend for themselves economically, they are also looking for how to feed their children. So it also contributes to what is called child labor because, you know, they must do something to at least feed. And then it also increases the illiteracy level in the society. And just like Obianuju has said, you know, the mother and the child at that particular time may be out of school for a very long time. In fact, some of them don't get the opportunity to go back to school. Not just the mother, as the case may be, the child that the mother gives back to also at most times lacks the opportunity to acquire formal education because of poverty.
So
and
this
and
has
then
a chain.
For the child as well. Another.
Yeah, I was just trying to acknowledge that.
Hello?
Yes, I'm trying to acknowledge that this does have a chain reaction, however you look at it. The girl child is actually the soul of the society. Yes. And if they neglect them, we will continue to pay the price. Obianuju, there must be some work that has been done that is obvious and can teach us a thing or two on how we can better increase awareness and reduce the instances of child marriages and forced marriages as well. Are there perhaps countries or initiatives that have stood out in the efforts and the results that they've gotten in that regard?
For there are countries that have done it. You have countries from the Western countries have achieved like a high level of curtailing child marriage. Not totally gone, but it has happened. You've had countries who have passed laws to say, but you see, the thing is that most of the things that those countries have done, Nigeria and African countries have done it. Why we have not achieved the same thing that they have achieved is because of issues peculiar to us. But what has worked for us in most instances is awareness. When the VAP law was passed, so many organizations took up the challenge of popularizing the VAP law within states, simplifying and popularizing it, like TechHa, like Hadi's Foundation. They moved to push for the popularization and simplification of the VAP law. This has helped tremendously, especially in southern part of Nigeria, but also in the northern part of Nigeria. Like Kaduna, for example, they went this extra mile for the VAP law and said that any form of rape of any minor would come with castration. Like, so you find that with this kind of laws existing and being simplified and made accessible to young people in secondary schools, primary schools, they themselves knowing their rights, how the law protects them, being able to speak to it has helped tremendously. You see that there are dropping rates now, but it is not as fast as we want it to. We would prefer that government also pushes for it. It helps to popularize it. This is not something that organizations can do on their own. Government also have to come into it and popularize these laws and make it much more simplified, because there's a lot of technical and legalistic jargon within it that people may not understand. But when you simplify it and people understand, know their rights and how to enforce their rights, it would greatly help. This has helped also in communities like in Abuja, where I stay. There has been a lot of inroads being made in stopping child marriage, because organizations like the Rotting Yamazi Foundation have pushed and simplified the VAP law, made it accessible to people, giving them access to safe spaces that they can go to when they are being coerced into going to child marriages. Mothers have run away with their children to safe houses to report. So these are some of the things that we can do. Providing safe spaces that they can go to report to, not necessarily going to the police, which might send them back, or law enforcement agencies that might send them back. But we need to have safe houses, sexual assault referral centers, SAC centers that people can go to report these issues and get safety. And government begin to take action and ensure that this does not continue. And when we make an example of one person, it changes the narrative within the community. We also need to talk to community leaders, traditional leaders, religious leaders within communities to understand the harms and the ills of child marriage and how we can mitigate it by them doing their own part by speaking out about it, putting in laws that says that you can't marry a child. These are some of the things that we can do. And these are things that have worked for many communities and would work for us if we adhere to it or if we use the same patterns too.
Dare, you're a man as well
ma'am.
as an advocate. I want you to talk to us on how we can better involve men and boys without reinforcing patriarchal narratives.
Thank you very much. I was going to say it is very, very important for male as well to own this campaign, because when we talk about child marriage or child brides, they are married to men. So men need also to be able to advocate. They need to see it from the perspective of how it affects their sexual reproductive health and rights, and also how it affects females' gender, mental health, and all these problems that we've talking about. So without putting that as a competition, we can have men, he or she, just like myself, advocating for the rights of women and girls, especially across community. And we've seen examples here in Oyo State when men themselves are coming together, male group, setting up local task forces that seeks to the welfare of women and girls, because men are not just men. We have mothers, we have sisters, we have aunties, we have wives, we have sisters at home. So whatever evil befalls our women also affects all of us. And so men will be able to stand in the gap to advocate for the rights of women and girls, and demand for end to child marriage. I mean, if men are aware, if men are sensitized, if men are standing up for these women, and men refuse to take girls that are below 18 according to the constitution of the country as wives, as brides, then we will be able to put an end to this. And then because men are mostly policymakers, we also need to strengthen political wills, especially from men in power, men in government, men who are policy makers, because of weakened political will, a lot of evil, a lot of these things are perpetrated, and people are able to get away with it. So with men in the helm of affairs, we need to also strengthen political will, and also be able to devise programs that can, not just rehabilitate mothers, the survivors, mothers, girls who have become bride at a tender age. We can also reintegrate them into the society and ensure that they have educational support programs. Thank you very much.
All right, I was actually going to ask about safe spaces, shelter, and legal aid for people who choose to leave the system. But I think more pressing would be asking you, Obianuju, how can government protect girls who flee from forced marriages? I mean, rationally, I know that there are places, NGOs, civil society have created safe spaces that women can go to, but is it enough? So let's talk about the government and how they can protect girls who are fleeing from forced marriages. In 1 minute, if you can, please.
Thank you very much. And this is very important. And I like the fact that you've already talked about shelters and safe spaces. They are not enough. Most of the shelters and safe spaces that exist are owned by or run by non-profit organizations or community-based organizations. Government needs to build theirs and use it, right? Equip it. If they can't manage it, they can always hand over to the non-profit organizations to manage, but they need to build. But also government needs to start making examples of people. One of the things that also bother me about child marriage is that sometimes you find out people who are married to people, these girls who are married to older men are victims of rape themselves. Child marriage is not an answer solution to rape or a punishment for a rapist. It's not. And so we need to also inculcate that in our laws. The government needs to come in and work with non-profit organizations, not just non-profit, even for-profit organizations who are building shelters. They need to work with them. Ministries of Women Affairs across the country need to come together and begin to build things like this for protection. But also, you can't just move them out and put them in a safe space forever. We should be thinking about empowerment for them, sending them back to school, give them access to skill set that will help enable them access economic opportunities and mobility afterwards. What is our long-term plan, not the short-term plan of getting them to the shelters? How do we ensure that they have access? These people should have access to free education and all of the things that they have been denied as a result.
I mean, this subject matter is inexhaustible. There are so many angles and ways to look at it. We've done what we can today. I hope this conversation continues after now. Thank you very much, Obianuju and Dare, for sparing the time to talk to us and educate us a little more on child and forced marriages. For me, it is not just the numbers, though they should shake us. 23.6 million girls in Nigeria alone were married before their 18th birthday. 10.3 million before they were even 15. These are not just statistics. They are stolen childhoods, silenced voices, futures cut short before they began. Forced marriage is not a tradition to preserve. It is a crisis to confront. Because every time a girl is forced into marriage, we not only fail her, we fail the generations that follow. A quick reminder here. While laws matter, enforcement matters more. While campaigns raise awareness, communities must raise their daughters and their sons differently. And while governments talk, they must also act with urgency and, yes, with heart. If you've watched this far, please share this conversation wherever you see it. Let it live beyond this studio, because the cost of silence is another girl that is lost. Thank you as always for your time and commitment to be with us on One Slot. Until next time, it is bye for now.